Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course on entrepreneurship. We have in the earlier sessions discussed a lot about ideation and prototyping, and I spoke a significant amount of time on how ideation is the fundamental building block of an entrepreneurial enterprise. In this session we will discuss one particular aspect of ideation, that aspect which brings us to certain conclusions within the ideation phase, and that aspect is the ideation workshop. Before we talk about ideation workshop, let us dwell a bit on the word workshop. Workshop, as we all know, is a place where certain inputs are worked upon and converted into a finished product. It is also a place probably where we repair certain things. But in the context of the topic we are discussing, ideation workshop is a place where several inputs with reference to the ideating activity are brought into the forum and they are brainstormed and a final conclusion is brought out. So, ideation workshop is very unique to entrepreneurial firms development, because this is the area where several brains can get together and come up with a feasible and viable proposition for the entrepreneurial firm. Like any other workshop, ideation workshop is also a collaborative workshop. But that said, there are significant differences between an ideation workshop and any other organizational workshop that typically happens in a company. As we go through this presentation and the lecture, we will come across those differences very critically. One of the fundamental differences is that the formal meetings are structure driven. When you have a meeting for understanding whether we should enter, let us say, a new region such as America, the goals are set, the discussions take place within the boundaries of a business strategy that has already been crafted, and the participants are also well known. That way, the formal meetings that take place under the usual organizational canopy are always structure driven and also are process driven, and they try to bring certain additional goals into the mainstream goals. On the other hand, ideation workshop is something which looks at creating a new aspect of business or even a new firm based on the identification of the problem in the marketplace and also delivery of a solution for the problem. Therefore, ideation workshop is a kind of endeavor which tries to bring the abstract into reality, not work on the reality which is already there to bring it to our organizational scope. That is the difference. And ideation workshop therefore is the foundation of startup development. It tries to discover problems that are unknown and tries to develop solutions for that. And those solutions are expected to be creative, sustainable and successful. Therefore, ideation workshop has got certain aspirations that stretch beyond the goals that a formal workshop would have. And to be able to be successful in this endeavor, certain methodologies, certain infrastructural support factors are required. So, these are the typical components of an ideation workshop. It starts with the stakeholders. Who are the right stakeholders to participate in an ideation workshop? Second, we require a facilitator. Every meeting will have a coordinator in an organizational sense, and in some cases there would not even be a coordinator. It could be a very participative meeting. But in the case of an ideation workshop, we specifically require a facilitator who is pretty much well known in the ideation methodology. We also require a facility, and that facility, as we will see in the next few slides, would have to be quite different from the lecture room or a conference room. We also require certain tools and processes to govern how the ideation workshop needs to be run. And finally, we will require certain analytics to capture whatever has been discussed and brought forth to a reasonable and viable conclusion. So, the components can be seen in terms of these explanatory factors as I have laid out here. Who are the stakeholders? Here we are talking about stakeholders rather than employees. When we talk about an organizational meeting, we look at departments and participants from the departments. Whereas when we talk about an ideation workshop, we look at the concept of stakeholders, whoever has a stake in the idea which we are trying to develop, or in the problem that we are trying to solve, or even the problem which we do not even know. Therefore, the stakeholders belong to a broader ecosystem rather than to the organization. Second, the facilitator. The facilitator could be an internal expert or an external expert, but he should be very well versed in the nuances of ideation. And what are the nuances of ideation can be covered later. And the facility should be reasonably expansive. When we look at an ideation workshop, we look at the possibility of people clustering around in different groups, people walking around, people looking out and trying to get new ideas. So, the facility should be reasonably expansive rather than be cloistered in a four-walled situation. And in terms of tools, we would like to put our brain to work, and therefore, several drawing board aids or visual aids are required. And in terms of processes, that is where the maximum emphasis would need to be. It has to be a very creative, non-judgmental and frank processes that need to be adopted, and the emphasis would be on creative thinking and open expression. And in terms of analytics, we look at something beyond data analytics. As we know, we look at capturing all the expressions, writing them down, and then trying to analyze in a very reasonable and qualitative way, and finally arriving at a filter of potentially successful and sustainable ideas. And also, to be successful in this venture, people would need to have a good business understanding, and as importantly a good technical understanding, because we are trying to solve a problem majorly through technology, but in some cases through a new business model as well. So, we will dwell a little more on the stakeholder differences between formal and ideation workshops. Departments are usually represented in a formal workshop, and let us say we look at a business plan development. Obviously, all the departments which are connected with developing a business plan, providing inputs, they are all brought together, and the departmental views get expressed in those meetings. I can do this, I can't do this, this is the extent to which I can stretch myself. For example, certain capacity decisions are required. Manufacturing department would say that this is the capacity for which I have been built. I can probably get another 10% overage, but not beyond that. So, it is about getting a departmental view and stretching it a bit more collaboratively. Whereas, in ideation workshop, while many stakeholders would be involved, stakeholders from the marketplace would be predominantly represented, and the views get generated spontaneously. There are no pre-bias that is there in the views, and people can change their views, people can look at other people's views and modify their own way. So, therefore, there is no departmental view or a formal party line that gets expressed in the ideation workshops. And as I said earlier, in informal workshops, the goals are pretty much well set, and the idea is to find out strategies and action plans by which those goals can be met. But in the ideation workshops, apart from the goal that we have to discover a problem which will lay the base for a solution, which in turn will lay the base for the entrepreneurial development, there are no specific goals. It's not about getting a market share up or getting a revenue share up. That is not the goal in an ideation workshop. Therefore, strategies in a way are developed on the fly in an ideation workshop. And in a formal workshop, the goals are linear. When we talk about goals like market share or profitability, we expect some kind of linearity. You provide more inputs, you will get a better output. So, the goals are linear, and the metrics are very visible in terms of market share, scale, size, scope, number of products, revenue, profitability, etc. Whereas, in the case of ideation workshop, the goals are very non-linear. It does not follow the principle of business that has been established so far. It could be actually very disruptive to the way the environment is organized. And the typical goals are in terms of developing certain products and services which are novel and which could discover and solve certain problems. In respect of a formal workshop, the goal is to merge the outcomes into the formal business planning and execution process. Whereas, in the case of ideation workshops, the goal is to set up a whole new business and lay the foundation for starting the entrepreneurial business. In formal workshops, you can have iterations. Okay, you can say that yes, we have covered this region, this state, and let us look at other regions later. And it is that way is a sum of the parts kind of situation in a formal workshop. Whereas, in a creative organizational ideation workshop, the goal is not really reached until the ideation phase is completed. Therefore, it is important to note these differences and accordingly mold our own ideation workshop if we were to undertake one. Then how does the facilitator differ between the formal and informal or ideation workshops? In formal workshops, the facilitator would be the managing director or the CXO, and in some cases the sponsoring department, and the head of the sponsoring department usually walks away with the role of the facilitator. Whereas in ideation workshops, even if we have the idea of setting up a process for discovering a new market need, the facilitator need not necessarily be the marketing person. It could be somebody who understands how to ideate, how to interpret the knowns and unknowns. So, there is no allegiance factor which is involved in an ideation workshop, and the selection is purely based on the prior experience in those kinds of activities. In a formal workshop, the participants and particularly the facilitator is very well skilled in articulating the business strategy and bringing the participants onto the aligned vision, strategy and execution mode. Whereas in case of ideation, there is no such thing as a goal that is being pursued in the meeting. It is actually trying to understand the abstract and converting the abstract or the fuzzy strategy into a realistic product market evaluation. Therefore, the objective here is to promote a boundaryless behavior on the parts of participants, which at times can go awry unless the facilitator has got a certain skill to bring together again the viewpoints to a common multiple. And in the case of formal workshop, the facilitator should have very good functional knowledge, and if the dominant theme is, let us say, entry into a new region, he should have very dominant functional knowledge of products and markets. But the outreaching also has to happen within the company value chain. Whereas in respect of the ideation workshop facilitator, the attributes required are those of empathy and collaboration, and the outreach extends into the entire external ecosystem. For example, if you are trying to make a two-wheeler out of a particular cycle, you need to understand how the two-wheeler could be parked in a parking system that takes care of the cycle. So, the empathy and the outreach extends far beyond the factory boundaries. You want to understand how this product is going to be treated in the parking stands or in the family houses. So, the outreach has to be more expansive. In respect of the formal workshops facilitator, the demit or the idea is not to challenge the established systems, structures, process, strategies and goals, rather work on them and make them better. Therefore, the leadership style accordingly is very much result oriented. In respect of the ideation workshop facilitator, the leadership style would be very much inclusive, very much participative, trying to explore the paths which are less traveled by the organization or the team of people and trying to explore the unknown. And we should also not have the feeling that the ideation workshops will have to be handled by only the founders or the entrepreneurs themselves. It is possible even for an employee who has got the entrepreneurial thinking to be facilitator in an ideation workshop. So, this is a typical way in which we try to mold the young thinkers into newer ways of thinking. This is about a particular exercise called Disruptomania, where we try to look at how a large automobile company can look at itself in different modes to handle the oncoming electric vehicle and autonomous vehicle thing. So, there could be a facilitator, but many participants. Then we will talk about the facility. What kind of facility do we need? That facility has to be beyond a conference room, and it could even be the marketplace, because one of the aspects of the ideation workshop, as you would see in the next few slides, is Gemba Walks. That is, you should understand what exactly is happening in the real place of business, which is not the company or the factory, but the marketplace. And the facility, when we have the campus where we will work through this ideation workshop, should be very spacious for walkthroughs, walkarounds, physical activities as well as brainstorming. It is supposed to have obviously, as any room would have, 4 walls, but ability to hold flip charts, post-its, display charts and drawing boards. I have personally seen certain very good conference halls which have been taken up for ideation, but there is no way in which anything can be pasted on those walls, and you try to put a flip chart, it will fall down. So, the very purpose of doing the exercise gets defeated on a very simple and in a way silly matter. So, we have to take care of the appropriate facility that could be organized for this. Then the facility should be designed in such a way that people could work individually, let us say on work desks, and also be clustered to have group thinking and group thoughts. And it would be great if the facility can be enhanced by visual design and augmented reality and virtual reality facilities. And without saying, of course, the facility should have good hospitality in terms of coffee breaks, lunch breaks, and inputs for that. So, this is one of the examples of how you would operate in a typical ideation workshop. You will have a larger question, and then people who try to answer those questions, they post their answers on the wall, and then you try to recluster them and then try to develop some analytics out of that. What are the tools for ideation workshop? If you are trying to discover a new product, for example, you want to have a toothbrush which brushes all the 32 teeth simultaneously, then you would like to have all the samples of toothpaste, toothbrushes which are available in the marketplace for you to think. You could also think about completely unrelated things. How does a brush let us say a wall, how does it do a flow? Because what you are trying to do is one surface getting brushed by another product. So, you need to have all relevant and sometimes not so relevant product samples. We should also have competitors' products which are available for seeing. Similarly, people have to be at times inspired to say that yes, the problem may look crazy, but there have been instances of people who have made problems for completely unknown issues and then developed products thereof and made successful businesses. So, what we need also are inspirational videos which will help channel the enthusiasm and creativity of participants in the right lines. And we need current and emerging technology platforms. We also require the models of proposed products if there are some things, and as the ideation workshop progresses and as the ideas take shape, we need to provide proper digital shape to those concepts, and for that we may need computer models and IT specialists for enhanced play. And at the end of the whole exercise, we may even need industrial designers who will provide elegant and good form factor for the idea which we have. So, regarding the processes for ideation workshop, what are the processes involved? First of all, we need to have consumer research, because market is the one which is providing sustenance for any of the products. So, consumer research wherein we identify the problem, then we require technology forecasting which is the solution platform. Then we need Gemba walks to identify how the products are performing and how this solution is expected to be performing. Then we need solution sketching, which is the initial solution idea. It could be rough drawing or a cardboard solution. Then we look at pressure testing the solution. Therefore, participants should have the challenging process inbuilt into their psychology. Then we freeze the design solution and we get into an initial manufacturing solution, which could even talk about make or buy, and we will finally coming to viability analysis and then lead to a product plan. And these processes are not done just once, they go through a create, refine, repeat process iteratively until we get a solution for the problem. And when we talk about technology ideation, again the idea would be to bring in all the kinds of technologies which are available. This is a snapshot of what we try to do for an advanced manufacturing workshop. So, if you want to digitize the factory, what kind of technologies would we need and what kind of technologies are available for use. So, the available technologies have been classified on a two-dimensional matrix, which included market strength on x axis and industry adoption on the y axis. Based on that, you might like to choose, and the participants may very well choose those things where this market strength is very high and the adaptation is already very high. On the other hand, you may say that to be distinguished and unique, I will choose something which is not yet fully adapted, but then I take a bet on that. It depends on how the participants brainstorm and come to a solution. Let us look at how the stakeholders for electric vehicle ideation workshop differ, because I said that the stakeholders for a formal project and an informal or not informal really, but a creative ideation workshop are different. Let us take the example of getting an electric vehicle into the automobile portfolio. So, if I simulate or imagine how this formal workshop would be constructed, people would say that marketing department, the design department, the manufacturing department, whoever is involved in getting a product out of the factory from the design board to the final factory quality premises would be involved, and these are all typically departmental participants. This is the way the conventional workshops is scoped. But if the same problem is looked at from an ideation workshop angle, people would have consumer put first. What are you comfortable? Although in the conventional workshop you have the marketing guy representing the consumer point of view, the way it differs in the ideation workshop is that the consumer is directly brought into the picture. Either you go to the consumer and find out what is happening, the team of people, not just the market researcher of the company. The team of ideation goes there and tries to find out from the consumer how he feels about an electric vehicle. Then similarly you look at the dealer, then you look at the designer, you look at the battery maker, you look at the financier, and you look at the business entrepreneur, not the business planner, the business entrepreneur. Is he willing to destroy his own IC engine automobile portfolio base and substitute with a newer electric vehicle base, and is he being entrepreneurial enough to take the decision in the company? So, the ideation stakeholders are a bit different from the departmental participants. And then what are the kind of idea options those people would have? On the left side we have the conventional workshop people. People will be kind of concerned with how do I phase in these electric vehicles, how do I phase out, that is his idea. Therefore, my overall capacity should not be impacted, my overall industry volume should not be affected. How do I substitute this IC engine by power pack, where do I source these power packs, is my production line suitable for an assembly of electric vehicle, where do I get my new component supplies, and what is going to be the top line and bottom line impact, and at the end of it what is going to be my market share, am I going to be up or down. That is the kind of concern the conventional workshop people would have. The ideation workshop people will have different types of approaches. Should I have a retrofit or a native EV? Native electric vehicle means you are building the whole vehicle ground up. You do not have to be thinking of putting a battery power pack where the IC engine is sitting. You are thinking, let us say, putting all the batteries on the chassis of the electric vehicle and then make the rest of the places available for some other use, or even reduce the overall profile of the entire car. You can go for lighter vehicles. Therefore, am I looking at a retrofit vehicle or a native electric vehicle? There is more fundamental discussion. And the consumer, does he want power or does he want range? Am I looking at elegance or utility? Are we looking at warranty or serviceability, and what is the final customer value proposition that I am providing? And in the end, I am making a market or I am substituting a market. These are the approaches of ideation stakeholders. Here again there is a significant difference how a departmental meeting takes place and how an ideation workshop takes place. And to be very open about this, this ideation workshop concept can be used even for complex projects. Let us have an Boeing or Airbus aircraft, and it has got several parts being manufactured in different countries. How do I simplify this entire manufacturing processes and global networking process? That could be even a problem that could be considered by an ideation workshop. Extending the analogy in what we had in terms of electric vehicle into a new drug formulation. Again, in a conventional workshop of a pharmaceutical company, these are the departments that are represented in a formal workshop. But if you look at an ideation workshop, you look at the patient, you look at the doctor, the medical rep who is actually selling the product to the doctors and the retailers, the pharmacy, the distributor, and the medico marketer. So, the participants are different, and the participants who are different are also going to come back with different kinds of approaches. The conventional workshop says that there should not be any prescription cannibalization. We are, let us say, thinking about combining two kinds of products and come up with a novel prescription, and those two basic products are also being supplied by the company. The overriding emphasis in a conventional discussion would be that yes, it is welcome to have this, but this should be additional sales and it should not cannibalize my own prescription. and it should be easy to formulate, easy availability of APIs. I should not be forced to create new constructions and new buildings for this. Product should be locally sourced, need not depend on China or some other country. Gross margins should be very high and incremental sales should be achieved. So, it is a very kind of very capitalistic view, if I may say so, of introducing a new product for healthcare. On the other hand, if you are looking at the ideation stakeholders, people would like to understand how are the drug usage patterns. So, if two products are being used as medicines and one has to be taken half an hour before breakfast and you are taking another half an hour after breakfast, how do I combine these two to have the same kind of impact, but at the same time are available in one single capsule or drug. So, how do the drug usage patterns be useful to develop a new formulation? And if I am trying to develop this, is there a medical rationale for this? Am I making a tablet which is twice the size of the previous two tablets because I am trying to combine, or I am bringing this in the form of a single tablet with the dual efficacy. So, what is the medical rationale? And are all patients going to be requiring these two tablets, or only certain class of patients requiring these two tablets? Therefore, is there an overall medical rationale to make this combination? What is going to be the therapeutic efficacy and safety? And whereas the previous discussion would emphasize on easy entry of this formulation, so that there is no additional cost, only additional margin. Here you might say that, okay, if I am able to get some kind of intellectual property through clinical trials in this particular product, maybe I would have certain exclusivity. Therefore, there will be a unique value proposition, and ultimately, as opposed to market share or non-cannibalization or getting incremental sale, the emphasis on ideation would be in terms of creating a blockbuster product or entrepreneurial thinking, how to make this happen. So, this is typically an example of an ideation workshop where you could see from the way the whole system is organized, people could have worked individually. We saw in another place that the people could cluster around a particular pillar and post their ideas and solutions, and after all this analysis is done and when the results are being presented, people are gathering around the main projection and trying to understand, assimilate and also express themselves on the problems as well as the solutions. So, this in a nutshell is the overall way in which an ideation workshop can be organized and how it could be very effective in the entrepreneurial setting. And this is a very core building block for ideation and prototyping work. Thank you so much.